This is the Wealthability for CPAs show. Better clients, better practice, better life. Here's Tom Wheelwright.
So there's probably nothing that makes clients more anxious than taxes and finance and money. I mean, these are really just high impact, high emotion topics. And communicating these topics is particularly difficult. On top of that, we've got to communicate not just with our clients, we've got to communicate with our staff. We've got to communicate with our partners, which can be one of the most difficult places to communicate. And so today we're going to learn actually how to build a communications plan that will soothe that anxiety and actually help a team run smoothly. And I think now as we're winding down and we're winding down the year, we're getting into a new year pretty soon here, and our clients, now we start all over again. So all the anxiety is winding down. It's just going to start up again in January. So it's actually our privilege and honor to have Julien Mirivel and Alexander or Alex Lyon with us today, who've written a book called Positive Communication for Leaders. And I love you've made the positive side of that. This is awesome. But I would, if you would, please introduce yourselves to our listeners. Just let us know a little bit about yourselves and how you got into talking about particularly this subject.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm Julien Mirivel. I'm a professor of communication at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock, where I have been now for 18 years. All of my degrees are in the field of communication. It's probably been my lifelong passion. I'm originally from France, and I came to the United States when I was about 15 years old as an exchange student. So really, my story begins with trying to learn English and trying to assimilate it, which was a huge communication problem, to face as a young teenager. But my passion today is really positive communication. And the reason why I moved in that direction is because I was always interested, first, in helping people communicate more effectively, but also in shining light on what we do when we are at our best. Because inside all of us, we have the capacity to communicate poorly, but we also have the capacity to communicate with excellence, with compassion, with courage. And so I wanted to kind of figure out what we do when we reach these best moments and try to help people get there.
Yeah, thank you. What about you, Alex?
It's my pleasure to have co-authored the book with Julien. So like Julien, I'm also a college professor. I teach at the State University of New York at their Brockport campus. And I also love leadership, love communication. That's the area that I teach in and research in. And like Julien, we do speaking, we do consulting. And I also have a YouTube channel called Communication Coach Alexander Lyon, which looks at not just this topic, but communication and leadership more generally.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. CPAs as a community, we're not exactly known for our great communication skills. So literally every time, so we have a CPA franchise, network and franchise. And every time I meet with them, we're talking about communication, because whenever we have an issue with the client, 100% of the time, it's a communication issue, not 99%. 100% of the time, it's a communication issue. It's never a technical issue. It's never a, my tax return was incorrect issue. 100% of the time, right, it's a communication issue. So this idea, and your book, Positive Communication for Leaders, I think this is something that we need so much in our industry, and not just CPAs, but the financial professional industry as a broader industry. So let me start by asking this question, because you were talking about this as you introduce yourself, Julien. What do you mean? What makes for great communication?
So, the way we describe it in the book is we use a model that I actually developed maybe about 10 years ago. That is a model of positive communication. So at the heart of our approach is we believe there are 6 behaviors that are really key for people to practice effective, ethical communication. And so I'm going to list them very quickly, and I'm sure Alex can add as well. But the behaviors are greeting to create connection, asking questions to be able to discover people, complementing to be able to affect them in a positive way, disclosing, which allows you to deepen relationships, encouraging, which allows you then to give and use communication as an act of giving towards social support. And then the sixth behavior is listening, which allows you to transcend perceived differences. And when people practice these behaviors, they exemplify what we believe is positive communication, effective communication, but also then have the ability to inspire and influence people around them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm in. Let's start talking about these. Alex, you're on.
Well, I didn't have much to add to that, except for the fact that if you boiled it all the way down and said, what are the necessary elements, you would come down to these six. If you take even one of them out, then there's going to be a gap. So you can add more if you want to, but this is a starting place. I like to think of these six behaviors as like when we play baseball, the metaphor I use is you hit the ball, you throw the ball, you catch the ball. These are the fundamentals, and you can get better and better at each of them, just like the pro ball players do, to reach higher levels of excellence. But these are the fundamentals. You have to start here and then build your skills from there.
Well, I'm going to let people read your book so they can get all of this. But I picked out three. Three of these hit me pretty hard when you were running through them. And the first one is asking questions. And this is the one I actually hit the hardest in my training. So I love this. I actually think the job of a professional advisor is to ask good questions. I actually think that's our primary job. So if you would give us your perspective on questions and how do you even learn how to ask good questions?
One of the key benefits of asking questions is that you figure out what the other person knows and understands. It's almost as if you're evaluating their level of knowledge and expertise. So if you just launched into a conversation with all the technical CPA jargon, you're going to lose them really quickly. The same way a physics, the same way a physics teacher is going to lose their freshmen if they just jump right into the deep water. So asking questions is a great way to hear what their interests are, of course, in terms of how you can help them, but also assess their knowledge. And it's a helpful way for you to get to know them more generally and what else is happening in their life and what they have going on, because there may be a bigger picture that you can help them with in terms of maybe a long-term investment plan and maximizing what they have to offer. So questions are a great way to gather information. It also, however, and I'll ask Julien to continue this, it shows people that you actually care about them. It shows that you want to take a moment to get to know them better instead of just talking at them. Julien, do you want to add to that a little bit?
Yeah, because, one of the things we talk about in the book is being able to we call it flipping your questions, right? Is we have a tendency when we interact to ask close-ended questions that focus on information, that narrow the interaction, that force the person to say yes or no. And it's often because we're focused on the task, right? And we want to get things done. In the book, we talk about flipping your questions from closed-ended to open-ended, because when you ask open-ended, you're truly in a position of discovery, and you're truly in a position of humility. Humility is the key value behind the behavior. And that allows you to get at the person. And if you can do that, if you can master both asking questions about tasks and asking questions to build relationships, you're only going to be stronger in any role you really function in.
So take somebody who's terrible at asking questions. Okay. So, which would honestly be most CPAs in my experience. I have members that have been members for years and they still have a hard time with it. Do you have any keys, any thought other than open-ended questions, which I totally get that. But anything that they can do, any simple tips that you can give them to maybe keep going on those questions and not stop with the very first answer. Because to me, it's like, I'll ask people why, because I'm a why guy. Yeah. And then I'll ask them, well, but what's the why behind that why? So to me, it's always, I want the deeper answer. I don't want the superficial answer. And I think as CPAs, as financial professionals, we tend to accept the superficial answer and we're done because we want to get into the task, right? We're so task driven. We don't want, we're not willing to spend the time to develop that relationship, when even though we know that really we're probably the most important financial relationship that our clients have.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think they should take a lesson out of your book, Tom. So podcasters, think about this. What do you have to do to be great at asking questions? First of all, and this is advice for everyone listening, you have to commit to asking more questions in the first place. You just have to make up your mind that, you know what, asking questions is valuable. As we say, a statistic in the book, only 6% of communication acts are questions, but that generates 60% of the conversation. So they're really powerful ways for you to engage other people. Second, just like a good podcaster, you have some questions in mind for your guests, standard types of questions to get you started in the conversation. So every person listening should have in their back pocket several questions they can use as a jumping off place. And then third, exactly what you're doing right now, ask a follow-up to dig deeper. So whatever the person says, you follow up on that. Tell me more about that. Oh, what else? Just follow up a little bit based upon what they say. And that will really open the door. And now you're in the flow of a conversation that can really open up and help you get to know not just their financial situation, but you get to know them as a person.
Yeah. One of the things I love actually is I love being a student. So my favorite thing in the world to do is to learn. And to me, asking questions is all about learning. And it doesn't matter if I'm learning about a person, their behavior, their background. But the reality is I don't think we can do our job without asking the questions, because how can I know? It's like, can you imagine going to a doctor and the doctor spends, asks one question, well, what hurts? And then they're done. And then they spend 14 minutes telling you how, you know, you need to do this and you need to do this, you need to do this, instead of the opposite, which doctors do, is they spend 14 minutes, because you only get 15 minutes, right? 14 minutes, 14 minutes asking questions. And then they go, oh, well, here's the prescription. This is it.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, this is exactly what actually the medical community faced as a challenge for years. I mean, and now there's been 3 decades of efforts to try to change the way physicians interact with patients in particular. And one of the key things is being able to develop their interviewing skills. You know, what Alex said is really so valuable, thinking about how to be creative in asking questions. One thing I would add is I think it's helpful for people who don't come up with questions naturally. Like if you're naturally curious and you want to learn, you're kind of in a position to soak it in, and so they come more naturally. But even writing down like 5 to 6 questions you want to make sure you hit on when you meet with a client. And they can be big, like, tell me about your story. What's bringing you in? What are your big financial goals? You know, how can I really serve you the best? What kind of relationship do you want us to have? I'm just coming up with them right now, right? But I think just knowing here are 5 to 6 questions I'm going to make sure I ask my clients, because that's going to establish the connection. If you can begin there, that's going to save you time long-term, which is what we learn in the medical community. When you did not ask the questions, you're solving the wrong problem and you're misdiagnosing the patient. Same thing in the world of CPAs. Spend some time learning about the other person, and that's going to save you time later on.
Yeah. One of my favorite questions to ask is, in a perfect world, what does this relationship look like? You know, from your point of view, I mean, what do you want out of this? Because I find every client to be different, right? Some clients want to be highly engaged. Other people say, I just want to take care of, you know, what are you looking for here? I just want to be able to sleep at night. Other clients go, I want to pay the very least amount of taxes possible, right? But how do you know that without asking the question? And I'm always mystified by CPAs and financial professionals who will just go into their spiel, if you will, and won't ask the questions.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, one question we put in the book, you know, you may want to transition to another of the key behaviors here, I know, but one of the behaviors that we talk about in the book, actually under disclosure, is simple sentence like, what complete the sentence from me. What I need from you is, and being able to share, like, here's what I need from you, and here's what you need from me, and being able to be on the same level playing field, it's going to help that interaction in that relationship 100% of the time.
So perfect. You made the transition for me, because my number 2 one was disclosure, was disclosing, which I find so interesting that you bring that up, because to me that's what social media is all about, right? Social media is all about disclosing. It's all about transparency and disclosing who we are. We actually do something where we always do an upfront contract with every time we meet with anybody. We say, okay, how much time do we have? You'll notice we did this, right? Beginning of this, how much time do we have? What do you want to get out of this? And here's what I'd like to have happen, by the end of this time. And is it okay? We just agree that we're going to come up with this result or this result. And that's going to be the conversation. And to me, that sounds a lot like that disclosure is you're disclosing what matters to you and then asking them to disclose what matters to them. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. People cannot read our minds.
Go ahead.
They can't read our minds. You might have done 100 conversations with clients, but this might be the first time they're engaging an accountant at this level. Right. And so you have to keep that in mind, that they may need a very open, transparent conversation about expectations, hopes, and dreams that go both ways. And I would just add to that, it's also helpful to disclose a little bit about who you are outside of work at your own comfort level, because that helps people get to know you and helps them get to trust you. So of course they want you to be good at the numbers, but they also want to feel like they're dealing with a whole human being. And I would say that's going to help you build a business and good word of mouth more than even being good with the numbers. We assume the accountants are good with the numbers, but if we know them, we trust them, and we feel a connection with them, that's the accountant I'm going to tell my friends about when they ask.
Well, what's interesting to me is that I think the hardest professional for somebody to change is their accountant. So they have this relationship, and because what I get all the time, I'll teach a class, I'll be speaking, people say, but I like my accountant. But I like my accountant. So that's the best thing you can do to keep them there, right? Is to have that relationship so that they do like you. So what would you like to add to that, Julien?
Well, I mean, for me, the biggest thing and what we try to show is that you can now have, closeness or collegiality or a sense of liking and trust without disclosure. That's the behavior that creates it. It's really important to see it that way, because without disclosure, you can have a lot of things like a compliment. One of the behaviors in the model is going to affect people. But just because you build on people's strength doesn't mean that they're going to identify with you, right? The behavior that really solidifies relationships, strengthens relationships, deepens relationship is disclosure. And I always give credit to Alex on this, because he really always talks about it as like the magical wand of communication, because it's one of the few behaviors that if you produce it, if you disclose, almost 100% of the time, it's not like a law, but most often people will also share something. So if you share a little bit about you, the other person will share a little bit about them. And it's in that process that the relationship is deepened.
It's almost like the law of reciprocity, right?
That's exactly right.
Exactly.
We share, we're open. Of course, there can be TMI, right?
Yes. We should give a warning about that. Don't get too personal too fast. That's the warning.
Right.
You just got to ease into the disclosures.
Exactly. Disclose certain things, but you don't disclose everything, right?
Yes.
You can feel yourself
intuitive too.
Say that again.
You can feel yourself bonding when you disclose. Sorry, Julien. And the other person reciprocates. You can literally feel your emotions change toward each other. You feel the bond solidify, and it is like a magic wand. It's the closest thing we have to it in communication.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to add, Alex is right on point, is this idea that disclosure is also counterintuitive to us, because it's the one behavior that's the riskiest, right? Because it says something about who we are. So in the world of relationship, disclosure is a bit of a risk, but it's again, it's the one behavior that actually gets you closer to people. So when you do it, takes a little bit of courage, but the payoff is closer connections.
Okay, so I'm going to go just one step deeper here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I would say, in my experience, most people don't even know themselves enough to disclose. So how do you, I mean, really, I mean, you think about it. Why are we accountants? We can focus on numbers. We don't have to focus on people, right? I mean, if I liked dealing with blood, I'd be a physician. I'd be a surgeon, right? I'm not a surgeon. I don't want to do that. That's not interesting to me. Numbers, that's numbers are actually very superficial when you look at them, but they're very factual, right? There's no, there's no, I don't have to wonder what's behind that, right? The number's the number, right? It's a great thing. Right. I mean, numbers are numbers. We like to say 2 + 2 is what you want it to be, but reality is most of the time it's 4. So how do you, if you're going to disclose something, how do you choose what to disclose? And how do you even get to the point where you are comfortable enough with yourself to disclose something that would generate that relationship?
So, and I can't wait to hear what Alex is going to say about this. I think he's got great ideas. I can just already tell. The first thing you mentioned when you started posing the question is, and I've been writing a little bit about this, is that self-awareness is one of the barriers we have to cross in order to communicate more effectively. That is a fact. And getting to know who we are is a journey, as is communication. And so really, when we talk about disclosure, what we're really asking people to do is to go on a journey of figuring out if they can open up a little bit more and become more authentic on that journey. So you're right that it actually has a lot of depth behind the simplicity of the behavior, because we are complex. We are not totally self-aware of who we are. We are discovering more about even ourselves. But think of it like a movement. I'm going to make an intentional decision in my communication to be as authentic as I can, to reveal who I am, to have the courage to speak up and share my thoughts, my ideas, and even my emotions. And that progression will get me closer to people.
Yeah. And I'll make that even more concrete. So taking the heart of what Julien said is that I would say start small. So start with the stuff that doesn't take all that much self-awareness. Like, what are your interests? What are your hobbies? You may deliberately decide to put several photographs where people can see them to spark a conversation. I'd have that at my desk and people say, oh, who's that? And then you disclose, you tell them about your family, you tell them about a picture of you playing tennis. Just disclose those easy going topics that everybody can relate to. And then you see how that goes. And if the other person handles it well, then you take another step and you can talk about maybe one of those topics in a little more depth, or you can introduce another topic altogether. So you take it all stepwise. The hard is to get to know each other. The heart of it is to form relationships over time at your own pace, but to do it in steps. Don't jump into, like we said, don't get too personal too fast. You don't have to reveal we're not talking about deep, dark secrets. We're just saying you are a whole person. You're not just in your role only, your job description only. You're a whole person that they're connecting with. And so help them get to know that whole person.
Yeah. When I'm training our CPAs, one of the things I do is I ask them, what do you care about? What do you value? What's important to you? Right. Because to me, once you ask that question, what do I care about? Okay. Well, what do I really care about? What's really important to me? And some of it is, and then I'll say, well, if they say they don't know, I'll say, well, look at where you spend your time, because where you spend your time and where you spend your money, and mostly where you spend your time, is what you really care about. And that, to me, that's a lot about, okay. And why then if you want to start getting deeper, you can say, well, why? Why do you spend your time there? Why do you spend your money there? Why is that important to you? What's driven that? And I find that the better I know why I do something, the easier it is for me to be authentic and disclose, but it's also makes it easier, for it actually gives me more confidence, because once you know who you are, you don't have to worry about what other people think because that's who you are. But if you're not sure who you are and you haven't done that kind of introspection work, then you're always worried about what somebody else thinks about you. And that's, I think, a really big concern, particularly when it comes to partners, staff, and clients.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, we do have those insecurities in terms of, especially when it comes to disclosure, because other people could evaluate you and jump to conclusions. I just thought of another tip, by the way, going back to asking questions. This is the earlier tip in the model. When you're asking questions, people will often reveal things about themselves. You say, "How's it going? What are you looking for?" And if they reveal anything where you see common ground, that is your opportunity to reciprocate on your part and give some common, share your common ground, disclose a little bit about that. And then there's always a bond formed over common ground.
Perfect. So let's wrap up with the third one that kind of hit me, which is the listening, which is really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do because, I always, the old saying, your parents always told you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Right. So you should be listening twice as often, twice as long as you should be talking. And if I could get this across to my sales team, it would be gold. But it's really hard. And it's very hard. You know all this information. They're asking you for your expertise. They're asking for this information. And yet so you want to spend all your time talking. Can you talk about, first of all, the value of listening? And then let's talk about how to listen.
So the value of listening, in the book, we propose that if you can truly listen to others, you can transcend the perceived differences that exist between you and others. And you're right. It's a funny, again, counterintuitive principle. A lot of people study communication because they want to learn how to speak, but the ultimate form of communication is deep listening, right? So you go in thinking, I'm going to do that, but actually the ultimate form is really this kind of learning to listen deeply. And it is very difficult. There are things that you can do to help. We talk about how really listening deeply is about, first of all, positioning yourself, even just physically, into the interaction in a way that's conducive to listening. So simply even leaning in biologically gives you a listening position, or squaring your shoulders gives you a listening position. But sometimes it's also philosophical, right? Approaching the interaction and knowing that you can discover people and understand that you're not going to judge the person. You're not going to assess who they are. You're going to try to really understand their world viewed from their perspective. And the thing with the listening is, I think it's easy to do when things are going well. Harder, the more the interaction becomes difficult, right? It's kind of like incremental. The scale suddenly becomes almost impossible, especially if you've got a world of difference between two people. So we try to show people in the book how they can overcome that. And I'm sure Alex, since we're kind of pressed for time here, is going to share some key pieces maybe that he's thinking about listening.
Well, what I was thinking about is when you said we have 1 mouth and 2 ears. In the book, we share a statistic that leaders listen on average twice as much as the average employee. And simply the act of listening makes you come across as a leader. That's how you'll be perceived. The best consultants are the best listeners. So in terms of salespeople, if they can listen more than they talk, they'll come across as having wisdom, perception. They'll be more trusted. I know we want to share our pitch, right? We have our talking points, but really listening is the thing that's going to make people feel close to you. Everybody loves a good listener. You can make a best friend just by listening to them. So it's a really powerful behavior.
Yeah, no question. I always tell people, I said, look, if you're talking, you're losing.
Yeah, that's great. That's some real talk, Tom. we should have put that in the book. If you're talking, you're losing.
Well, you think about who controls the conversation, right?
Yeah.
I'm when I do a podcast, I'm asking the questions, right? So by asking the questions, by definition, I'm in control of the conversation, right? And so the minute we're talking instead of asking the questions and listening, we're actually giving up control of the relationship, and we're giving up control of the situation, control of the conversation. And when we're the advisor, honestly, our clients want us to be in control, but the only way we can be in control, it seems to me, is to listen.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you just said. I even put it in the chat, so I remember, if you're talking, you're losing. It's a great metaphor for thinking about what this is all about. And we do in the book, really invite people to start practicing, because just like any other skill, you can build on it. And that's really our point, is that you may be at a particular baseline level, but by focusing your energy, your time, and some habits, you can truly improve the way that you listen to other people.
Yeah. And I just want to add that you're not wrong. Everything you said about listening is correct. We just want to reemphasize that it has to be authentic. It has to come from a place of really caring about people, not a superficial behavior. We've all been caught fake listening. I get it. But we're not talking about the mere behaviors. We're talking about like genuinely caring about what the other person has to say, not doing it so we can close a sale, but doing it so we can hear them, empathize, connect. And once you do that, usually the rest of the business relationship will work itself out pretty well.
No, I love that. And that's why I think that, that curiosity, one of the values, besides running a network of CPAs and a franchise, I actually run my own CPA firm. And well, my partner runs the CPA firm, but one of our values is be curious.
Yeah.
And another one is be genuine. So, my partner who came up with these with the staff, seriously, they'd be right on the same page with you. Everything you're talking about, they're doing it, which is what makes them such a great team, frankly, is because they actually model this. They want this. They want to be genuine. They want to communicate. They want to listen. They want to work together. And it's, even though it can be the height of tax season, they're happy together because they're actually participating with each other. They're working with each other and serving each other. So I think that's a really good point. Any final points that you'd like to make here?
I just want to give your audience maybe one thing that they can physically do that will teach them listening. Are you ready?
Please.
So I think we can do this
together.
Take your right hand and make a really tight fist like this. I'm going to teach you listening in 30 seconds. And then all I want you to do is put the palm up and slowly open your hand so your hand opens up. That is the story of listening. If you feel yourself getting tight or not engaging or disconnecting or withdrawing or attacking, just physically open your hand and you'll notice that maybe the body will relax and you'll change your perspective on what's happening in the interaction.
I love that. Final words, Alex?
I think Julien said it best. I'm not going to be able to top that. I know when to shut up.
That's awesome.
We have our moments, I guess.
That's fantastic. I think this is terrific. Our motto is better clients, better practice, better life. And I really see that this communication and developing these communication skills, that's where you end up with the better clients. And because you're asking the questions, to me, I don't want every client. I don't. I want only the clients that I want. And so how am I going to know that if I'm not asking the questions, disclosing, which helps them disclose, and then actively listening to them? How am I going to do that? And the other three, I understand, are just as important, but you're going to have to read the book, Positive Communication for Leaders, Proven Strategies for Inspiring Unity and Effecting Change. It's been Julien Mirivel and Alex Lyon. Sorry.
You got it.
I'm listening to Julien. So Julien, I spent a couple of years when I was a young man in Paris. And so
great.
I'm hearing a French accent. I go to French, so I apologize for that, Alex.
No worries at all.
Where could, outside of buying your book, where could we go for more information about what you're teaching?
The positivecommunicationforleaders.com website. You can check the book out there, and on that website, you can visit Julien's page or my page as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everybody for joining us and being willing to get a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Because when we do, and we actually get into the listening, the disclosing, the questions, and the other three behaviors that we need in order to have a great communication, we're always going to end up with better clients, a better practice, and a better life. We'll see y'all next time.
You've been listening to the Wealthability for CPAs show. Better clients, better practice, better life. To learn more, go to wealthability.com.